guess I'll call this meeting to order, the special meeting of the Holland Historic District Commission to review Historic District decision or guidelines. Let's see, I'll call the roll as well. Let's see, Kim?
Yes, here.
Okay. John Shea is not here. I'm here. Mark Cook. Pierre is not here. Justin Lambers.
Here.
Nick Walensky.
Here.
And I think that's it. So Anna, do you want to just walk us through?
Yeah, so we don't have anyone present for public comment. It looks like it's just us.
Okay.
So moving on to review of the guidelines. First, thank you all for coming here and looking at this document. I know it's been out there for a very long time. We're going on almost a year. But my goal today is that we can all feel comfortable with what we're putting out there, and then the next step will be sending this to SHPO for comment, and then hopefully publishing it to the city website and getting some physical copies printed. So I'm going to try and make this as easy to see up there, and if you have it in front of you. So this is what we have for the start. Again, these dates will be updated after our decisions today.
What's in place today? Do we have just something that's somewhat outdated, needed
Yes.
to be, okay.
That's a good question. So we have, it's called like Holland Historic District Guidelines, a Pact with the Past, and that's what's on our website currently. And I actually don't know how much of a review process that went through. I think it was put together in maybe 2007 or 2008. And it's sort of a one page on the highlights of our guidelines. So doors, porches, windows.
Okay.
So this is a much more expanded version that the previous preservation planner, Phil Meyer, put a lot of work into. The commissioners, past and present, have put a lot of work into just trying to create a more detailed guidelines, guidance, and sort of reference.
Okay.
I am so grateful for it. It's really helped in my transition into this role, knowing, sort of where we stand. And so,
Well, I was just thinking when we went through our fire renovation, and this was back 6-7 years ago, there wasn't much out there, and we were flying blind. And so that meant multiple visits to the committee, which was a serious pain while we were waiting to get this thing renoed.
yeah.
And then we had to redo that when we built the garage, and that was a hassle. So this was very helpful. I've gone through it a couple of times, and there's a lot of detail in there that people can garner from it.
Yeah, I've already used it with some of the cases we've seen recently, just sort of making it clear each of the things we're looking for. So I'm excited to keep using it.
Thanks for the update.
Yeah. So we'll just scroll through, and if there's something you see that you'd like to stop on, let me know. Otherwise, I'll stop where we had comments and suggestions shared. One thing I'll note is that everything is hyperlinked. I don't know if you discovered that or not. So that was one thing I did to try and make this user-friendly. The new Unified Development Ordinance that the city put together also has that kind of setup, and I find it helpful when I reference it. So that was just like a behind-the-scenes edition. Okay, so this is the first section, which is on who is able to review and what sort of projects need to be reviewed by the HDC.
I did notice one
Yes.
small typo. I was going to email you, but I forgot. On page 4, go back up. It's towards the bottom of the list of landscaping yard improvements. No, N in improvements.
Good catch. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Minor thing, but
No, that's all.
But I saw it.
All edits, grammar, spelling, everything. That's why we're here. Okay. So this is similar. I have the last version that was reviewed that Phil put together here, if anyone's curious. But this is the same setup, just formatted a little bit differently, of the proposed review areas. So the first thing that I was hoping to talk about is that there were several sections that were read originally, and from talking to Mallory and sort of digging back through minutes, it looks like those were things that were proposed by Phil from hearing commissioners were saying things they were interested in and including in the guidelines now or later. And a lot of them require ordinance amendments. So this first one was on designated cultural landscapes. So currently only Vinralty Farm is subject to this criteria, and there was the suggestion to also include Washington Boulevard, the Washington School Green, Centennial Park, and the adjacent streetscapes. I'm not sure if any of you remember conversations about this. Again, I wasn't a part of them if and when they happened. But I think because this is not something that's specifically in our ordinance right now, it's probably not something that we should put out in the guidelines until an action is made on it. Like I mentioned, Vinralty Farm does follow these, so we could include it just for that property. On the other side, that's a city-owned property, and so it's kind of thinking about the audience of this book a little bit.
Right.
So that was one of sort of the things when I've been working on this, I'm like, oh, I don't know. And we talk about it later, and I can show you what those other sections look like. But so that's one consideration that, well, I think it's relevant, and it's definitely something we can continue having conversations on. And if you're interested, I can look into what process would need to happen to expand the ordinance. Right now, the HDC does not have this sort of oversight on these areas.
But the difference between the B and the C sections, the B is admin review, the BC is just an admin consult,
So
right?
a COA isn't required.
So it's not required.
But, right.
I would rather try to leave it as is, where
Okay.
it's not in the ordinance. I don't think that we should try to get it in the ordinance because power grabs at the level of the ordinance can backfire.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think that when it's in the form of a guideline, it still implies a certain interest that this commission might have on cultural landscapes generally.
Okay,
And I think that's healthy
okay.
until some later date where somebody feels more inclined to try to grab more control over them or
Sure.
relinquish.
Okay. No, that makes sense to me, and I think also just in pointing out that, it's not necessarily issuing a COA, but having that information there keeps it in the conversation.
There's something about us even talking about it that reminds the city that these things are part of the historic fabric.
Mm-hmm.
Washington Boulevard is a great example of that.
Mhm.
That's not a park, it's really not, it's just a kind of public space that belongs in here and is appropriate for us to be talking about and thinking about and caring about, but there's really nowhere else for it to live other than within some conversation about cultural landscapes.
Right, okay.
Do you think we need to change the language of that note at all, just to make it clear that this is a recommended consult or review and not that there's no specific ordinance that's requiring it, but or do you think that's clear enough?
So in the second section of this document, it goes into more detail about the designated cultural landscapes, and that includes the larger note about the HDC's wishes on
Okay.
this. So it's explained there.
Okay.
However, that's assuming someone moves from this one to that one to gain that information. So I don't think
Right.
it might make sense to add one here.
It seems like in a lot of cases it's actually the city as the audience, like you were saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
We're good.
the city has the ability to sort through that and
Yeah.
understand what's
Right.
appropriate.
And you do have that subnote that said designation ordinance specifically requires review, specifically for that Vinralty Farm.
Right. The strip.
I do wonder if we should expand Washington Boulevard to include the entire boulevard network.
On 12th Street and
Yes.
yeah, okay. I think that makes sense, especially, I mean, streetscapes within the district are mentioned, but that additional boulevard also makes sense.
So just a question, because as I'm learning this, it's my understanding, I'm seeing this come together, there's a higher level for the historic commission, but there's also the homeowner level. Is that kind of where we're going with this? So this would cover some of the higher level city issues that come out of questions from historic district recommendations or movements versus a homeowner's view of it? Is that a fair statement, or am I missing something here?
So I think, yes, in a way, I guess that's what we're talking about with audience, that a lot of these things are the public right-of-way or city-owned
Right.
parks and properties, so it wouldn't be something that, or it's not something that I see a resident applying a COA
Correct.
or using.
But this
for.
is something the residents will see as they go through.
Yeah.
Okay.
They
Be
will.
kind of aware, yeah.
On occasion, the city needs to be held to the same accountability
Okay.
and process as a resident. So
Okay.
the greenhouse is a good example of
Sure.
that. Or this building,
Right.
which is in the historic district.
Right.
So
And be on the agenda next month,
Is that right? For what?
the outside.
What are they gonna do?
I mean, I can, it's a long list. Masonry,
Repairs?
Just like
repairs,
checkpointing?
yeah.
Nothing changing?
No,
No.
yep.
So,
Okay, well, that's perfect. And that helps me understand a little bit too, because I was going through this and I thought, designated cultural landscapes, how does that apply
No, yeah.
from a residential look versus, but I guess that's why I was questioning why, but makes sense.
And our hope would be if the city was gonna build a cell tower in the middle of the boulevard in this historic district, that
Correct.
somebody would, you know, say, is this okay, or how do you feel about this, or can we have a, you know, design that's compatible,
Okay.
or that kind of
Right.
thing. I don't know, is that kind of.
And I think some consultation has maybe happened. Do
Yeah.
you remember? I think
Yeah, because we
10th
had a thing
Street-
about what was it, there was some kind of the Wi-Fi things. the
Yeah,
extenders
and
or
cell
something.
towers.
Yeah, cell
Mhm.
towers being combined with street lights and, you know, that kind
Yep.
of stuff, so.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. That helps clarify thoughts and where we are. That with me. Any other concerns?
it puts you in a little bit of a limbo, but it's
I think
kind
it's
of handy.
yeah. I think so, to have it to refer to and yeah. Yep. Okay. So decks and patios. Demolition. Doors and windows, perhaps one of the most referenced. So this is another one of the red advisory sections on flat concrete work. Again, more of the detail happens later on in this document, but currently flat concrete work is an area not reviewed by the Historic District Commission in the ordinance. I understand why it perhaps should be, but right now it's not, and so that's again another area. We can provide guidance, but we can't require a COA.
Right, so that's why I'm wondering, like, when we have the A, that signals to me that if I would do any of this stuff, it would require historic district review, but
Right.
we're saying we don't have an ordinance that
The ordinance explicitly says
doesn't
we don't.
require that.
Yeah.
So is this conflicting, or does it make sense? Do we have the authority to even say that? You
Right.
know?
And it's my understanding that we don't.
Yeah.
We can provide guidelines, but we
Right.
can't, in this section, to me, this is sort of misrepresenting what we can do right now.
Yeah.
It keeps going a little bit.
So everything could take that out, or is there a way to put it in there as admin consult, or is that even, it's on there? I don't know. What are other people's thoughts?
Well, with that advisory being there, that should designate it and call it out too, that it's not, right?
Yeah, so that's a little bit of me just making sure it doesn't get lost in everything.
Right,
yeah.
Yes, but I don't know, and we could do more to define what that means if we were to include it, but I'm not sure a resident reading this would realize.
Right, and I wonder if in this section we just have a note saying that currently the HDC doesn't have authority to make a recommendation or approval on a change in this area, but our guidelines are still listed for this later, and still have that section later on
Right.
of what we would like to see regarding that.
I'm good with that.
If you change the review by to like NA or something, you know, not applicable, would that?
Yeah, I think I like an idea of a combination of those. So there's a very
Yeah.
similar statement to that in the second half, so that
Yeah.
would be pretty easy to include here. And then we could include sort of a list of what are some of the proposed projects, which is what is currently here.
So really all of these could be Cs, technically, no historic review required. Because that's technically true, right?
Yeah.
So what's the timeline on getting something like this into an ordinance?
That's a good question, and that's something that I need to learn a little bit more about. Hopefully something I was hoping to take away from today where we had interest, and if there were any areas
Hey.
to focus on.
I mean,
Yes.
if we're gonna go to publication with this and spend a ton of money and it's gonna change in 6 weeks,
Right, so I don't think it would change that quickly. That was another note I had, that I see this document as something that's updated regularly. I don't think we should have this in place for 10 years because the district is changing, standards are changing, our understanding is changing. So that's one goal in having this live primarily digitally on the website, is that it's easier to change. And then right now the plans are to have a couple physical copies at the library and a couple physical copies here at City Hall, since it's about 160 pages right now. That's both budget-wise and just thinking of the sort of the world we're living in now. Having it available to people who need the physical copy to reference, but then also having that online version that can be more easily changed and updated. Yeah. Does that kind of clarify that? Okay. So right now, I'm hearing about this one, adding the note about not currently reviewed, but guidelines later, and then including what items would fall under that category, but not including that they have to have a COA because they don't. Okay.
That's what I'm thinking.
Any other thoughts? Okay. So a similar section would be landscaping and yard improvements here. The HDC does not review landscaping unless a foundation is involved. Swimming pools, hot tubs, and spas are on here if they're visible. I'm not entirely sure where that came from, but I mean, it makes sense to a certain extent if it's in the ground. So I'm comfortable with this remaining as is because I get questions pretty frequently about landscaping, so it's nice to have something to refer to, but also thinking back to the conversation we just had, if an additional sort of statement about the HTC does not review
Mhm.
landscaping. Again, it's explained later, but
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm on board with that.
okay. Any other thoughts about landscaping? Okay. So that was the end of sort of that quick reference for review area. Any final thoughts about that? Or it doesn't have to be final thoughts, but any thoughts right now before we move on to the next section?
No.
Okay. So next is the design guidelines themselves. Starts with an overview of the Secretary of the Interior standards.
So
Yeah.
I don't mean to open up a can of worms on this, but I've always kind of been a little bit uncomfortable with how we get our authority
Mm-hmm.
and how tied we have to be to the Secretary's standards. And for that matter, how tied we have to be to SHPO.
Yeah.
And so I would like us to, at some point, this may or may not be the right time, it's probably not the right time, to actually visit this with the city attorney and with the full ordinance
Mm-hmm.
to cross-check, and with somebody like Mark Vanderploeg,
Mm-hmm.
and understand completely once and for all what do we really have to obey and what do we actually have local authority on.
Yeah.
And we might still choose to obey or align with these standards, but as a local city, I'm
Mhm.
uncomfortable with taking down from on high, like federal standards or even state standards when we are operating at the scale of the city.
That's something I can look into, and I can start a conversation with Mark and see
Yeah.
what we need to do to have that conversation. From my understanding right now, a lot of it has to do with the state of Michigan statute that established sort of the historic district and historic preservation programs within the state that are HDC and historic districts were sort of born out of. But I think it's fair that a more thorough review of our ordinance and sort of our bylaws also is definitely needed and would be a valuable thing to do and to get a better understanding.
Yeah, because when I joined this commission, we didn't read the standards and we made motions. We just made motions, and then Grace Smith felt it necessary for us to start citing a standard in each case. But those standards reflect a certain mainstream philosophy which may or may not align with this community's desires.
Okay, fair.
Also, they get misinterpreted and misused in motions all the time because we're trying to get to where we want to go.
Right.
And yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
And I guess when you open up that conversation with him, like another way of asking this too is, why does SHPO need to, like, we'll welcome their comments, I suppose, but like really, we don't really, I don't know how comfortable I am with SHPO, like, basically forcing an attitude on us.
Yeah, and so SHPO reviewing our guidelines is because the City of Holland is a certified local government,
Yep.
the CLG, and so that's what's initiating that. If we were operating a historic district commission and not a CLG, that oversight would not, to my understanding, would not be.
Yeah, I understand that, but I think that that's a power grab.
Okay to move on? All right. Statement on character defining features. Sort of a general statement on alternative materials. It's mentioned in each relevant section as well.
Can we go up one
Yep.
section? When I was reading this too, I was kind of wanting some statement that speaks to the historic urbanism as a layer that exists within our neighborhoods. And we should be looking at projects holistically, so we don't just consider what's the cultural landscape or what's the architectural aspect, but what's also the urbanistic aspect.
So you're talking about putting the project in the context of the neighborhood that it's in, or?
Yeah, and understanding like what is it about a historic neighborhood, because a lot of that is a little bit, it's like adjacent to the actual architectural design, but it turns out that the architectural design is actually responding to a certain historic development pattern and circulation pattern and public space program and so on. So in such a way that the building is actually not able to be fully separated from the urban context that it's in. So an example of this would be like a resident might come in and want to close off one, like we had this, where we had a porch where there was 2 staircases coming off the porch. And the resident wanted to basically say, I can close one, I still have another one. But this porch was addressing public space in 2 different directions. And there was a certain hierarchy to it. And we were able to talk to that applicant about sort of the urbanism of that porch and of that streetscape and how the porch interacts with the streetscape. But it's really not in our guidelines. It's not really in our codified way of thinking, but it really should be because it's equally important to the architecture.
Okay. So that's something you see as like a separate paragraph addressed in this section, or?
So if you go, okay, so here we are. We have stylistic features. We call up the skilled craftsmanship. Character defining features. Something along those lines where this is what I'm describing is a character defining layer. I wouldn't call it features.
Okay.
But it's a layer of defining character that is equally important to those. So maybe it's just another bullet point or another numbered item.
Okay.
A huge one is hierarchy. When people try to match the back of the back porch to the front porch because they think they're supposed to match, and really the front porch should be more embellished urbanistically because that's what's addressing more public space, and you get more coherence if you have some dialing down of that embellishment to express that space in the back is semi-public, semi-private, as opposed to fully public. And so just helping our applicants think a little bit more along those lines, I think, is a healthy thing for the city.
Okay. Any other thoughts or comments? So here's that image we were talking about at the beginning.
Right.
After our conversation, do we still feel like that's appropriate knowing it's not original?
It's so beautiful though.
This is the front cover image of the old guidelines.
I don't think that one's appropriate. I think there's a lot going on with that entryway that's not characteristic of the dish. I mean, it's cool, but I mean, if we were to really get into it, are we sure what's even historic on that thing?
Well, yeah.
Yeah, I was saying I have a picture of that house with its original full-length porch, so that's totally not original to the house.
When do you think that went in?
I don't know, what was the lifetime of a porch in those days? Probably 30 years or something, I think. I mean, before, if people took off porches because they didn't want to although this person put in a lot of money in the porch, obviously, to redo it. You know, maybe it's 50 years older.
I'm just a little confused in terms of like what era we think that porch is even from, or that entry is even from.
Yeah. Yeah, it would probably take some research to even figure that out. Yeah, I'm trying to think. I think the postcard that I have of it is probably from the 20s or 30s, you know, that shows it with the original porch on it.
Is there a different specific house that you can think of that would better visualize what we are looking for with this architectural detail ornamentation section? Is there another shining example of that we could post?
I don't know. I'm probably just nitpicking. I just feel like it's kind of an outlier in
No,
a lot of ways.
I agree, especially after hearing more about the backstory that I didn't
See
know.
that, yeah.
Most of our city photos only date back to the surveys that were done, so the 1980s to more recent.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the Capon house would be one that I would think of maybe.
Or the Coatsworth house across the street. I don't remember seeing that anywhere, and that's a
Yeah.
pretty nice. Again, I don't know if that front porch is. It's pretty. We can quickly add.
I think Phil Meyer told me that cupola was late added.
Yeah, its survey images don't include it.
Okay.
Yeah, Capon House would be a good one though. There's definitely a level of ornamentation and detail there that it would be a good example.
That's a nit. That I'm probably making too big of a deal out of that one.
No, and I mean, I have images of the Capon house. That would be very easy to swap in. I think it's included later. I've gone through different image configurations, so we'll see if it shows up. But I
Gotcha.
think possibly we'll see.
There's the Charter House, which is Elisa Crawford's house.
Mhm.
Might be nice, but you might have to take a field trip to take a picture of it.
It's a pleasant time of year for that.
Yes.
Right?
I've
Last
seen
week,
her out walking before.
yeah, last week I did a loop to see what had been accomplished over the winter, and lots of COAs were fulfilled. So
I was gonna ask like what the process is for circling back, especially on some of the ones that we've caught
yeah,
people on, and you know work had already been done or something. And like I think there's a door on 12th or 13th that we had to like
Yeah.
tell him he needed to get a new one, and
So that was the on one of the Vina Clausen houses.
Yeah.
Yeah, the brick house.
Yeah.
so yeah, I don't entirely know what was done before I
Yeah.
started. I know what I been
you know
doing.
what your process is.
Yeah. I don't really know if there was a process. That's actually a conversation we've been
Yeah.
having at the staff level, is how can we have more review afterwards. So I did a site visit to the house on 9th Street to make sure that all of their COAs were followed through. But usually, yeah, walk the district with the
There-
list of the ones that I know
Yeah.
should be completed, and
Mhm.
go see what I can see from the sidewalk.
Phil was out walking every morning. Like, he was up like early, like 6 o'clock walking.
I'm more of a lunchtime one.
Yeah,
Stop
there you
for and eat along the way, but yeah, when it's nicer weather also.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right, so find a new image for this slot.
for this one. Okay, so this is awnings and canopies. Mark pointed out to me this sentence here at the end, which I agree with, is perhaps not what the Historic District Commission would want to influence someone's decision.
Yeah, I don't know if that's necessarily a guideline that we
Yeah.
would agree with.
Mhm.
Everything else is sort of just facts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're definitely not inexpensive.
Right. And do
Right.
they improve a building's appearance by adding something new, you know?
Yeah, I mean, maybe not, but with our stock of buildings in particular, which is a lot of vernacular residential architecture,
Mhm.
probably not.
Okay, then I will omit
Yeah.
the sentence. Any other concerns?
Good catch there.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That's because we have awnings, and we love our awnings, and
We
put
have
them up
some,
every
too.
year, and they're wonderful, but I don't think we did it to dramatically improve our buildings' appearance.
Right. I'm just thinking of like a house that doesn't have them or doesn't have
Yeah.
the history of it. Does
Yeah.
that sentence make sense for
Right,
that?
no, that's what my feeling was,
You
that
know?
you don't want to be saying, hey, here's a cool add-on to your house, you know?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep. Okay. Barrier-free access. This has not happened yet, but it's still
It's
an
a cool
example.
example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a blue and white house that used to
Yep.
be.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Definitely noticed when that one got painted
Yeah.
too. It's like, whoa, it's different.
So here's the second half of our designated cultural landscapes. Just sort of rereading what the note says. Yeah, so that's sort of what shows, I think, what at the time Phil's intentions were with this moving forward,
Mhm.
acknowledging it's just Royalty Farm, and then the Centennial Park Management Plan as sort of being a guideline. Again, it's sort of, this portion is directed directly to the city.
Mhm.
With that note, and like we talked about earlier, I think it's okay to keep the
Mhm.
information.
Mm-hmm.
Any other additional thoughts or?
One thing that I don't know if it belongs in here or not, but monuments.
Hmm.
If there's actual monuments, those can be historic and might be deserving of their own bullet point.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure I've heard that come up other than markers, which are kind of a fuzzy, owned by the state,
Mhm.
maintained by the city.
You know, some towns monuments are a pretty big deal right now.
Absolutely, I was thinking the same thing.
Exactly.
Okay. Decks and patios. Some sections I don't have images just because
Yeah.
there's not always great totally visible examples, and decks are one of them. But if you have one in your head or a property in your head, please tell me. Same with demolition. Doors and windows. I know this is one that we talk about a lot. Do we feel like this section does it justice, or? And again, like I said, I mean, we have to expect that this document will grow and change over time as our understanding, especially if the alternative materials changes.
So what is do we have like a favorite we like aluminum clad and fiberglass clad, or what is our?
So we say that we like repairing original
Yeah.
and then replacing with wood, and then we get a little bit fuzzy and don't really rate the other ones. Vinyl clad's even listed. It's more, it says that this is not, or it says somewhere that it's not
Not
approved,
to
but
be
we,
considered.
yeah, but it is defined here. That's possibly one that could, I understand why it's defined because it's an option that people will see, but also vinyl and vinyl clad aren't typically ones that would be supported. But there's the alternative materials are presented in sort of an even space.
Okay.
I'm trying to find, I thought I had seen a sentence that I.
Because I had a builder tell me, like, you guys always push the fiberglass, but the aluminum looks way more. That was Jeff Burke. So.
Yeah.
And that's where I want to look at the model of the number. So we had somebody come in saying, I want to do the Fibrex windows. And I have seen different lines of that Fibrex. And I know that, you know, the Anderson 100 Fibrex and a vinyl window look very similar, and they have very thick and definitely not the look that I think we want. But you can get a Fibrex 400 series, and that's a lot more true to the look. And I thought there was a sentence in here that talked about that, but I don't remember where I saw this.
So right here it talks about appearance of the finished window or door is
Yes.
a paramount concern.
That sentence.
Yeah, steel, vinyl, aluminum, or fiberglass seldom match the appearance of wood and do not lend themselves to the application of added detailing.
Yeah. That's the sentence that I liked.
So when an applicant or a potential applicant reaches out to me about windows, I always say, you know, repair, here are resources for repair. If you can't repair, wood replacement, and then kind of see how the conversation goes. Again, it doesn't always work.
Right, yeah.
I mean, we've seen that coming through. So that's the attitude I've had towards it. If I get an application for vinyl, I'll usually ask, you know, have you considered another option? Yeah.
I guess there's a lot of instances though where the window is a new window, and it'd be helpful to know what our first choice is for those.
I would love to see if we have a list of some addresses of homes that we've approved, different window types that we could go and see on site and say, okay, because I feel like we get repetitions of window series come across our desk, and it'd be good to say like, okay, so you're proposing this material, this Pella series Impervia. Now we know what that looks like on a house. What do we think? Was that a successful application, or is that a window that doesn't achieve that that appearance that we say is of paramount concern?
I really like that idea. And with a little bit of digging into past COAs and checking to make sure that they were completed, that's something that I think I could pull together.
Yeah.
Maybe be a fun summertime activity for us.
So when the back of the house burned off, we had to put composite in there, and that was approved at the time by the Padnos era of the HH. So, and I think it looks good, and it works. It's functional. It wasn't aluminum clad, but to put a wood window in there just wasn't a good fit at the time. So the contractor went that route.
Yeah, and I don't want to. I understand. I know Kim Ike will always say that the wood ones will last so much longer. I don't know that, but visually from the street, I think you can get an aluminum or a Fibrex model that looks very similar that, you know, nobody would really bat an eye at.
You'd have to get really close.
Yeah, exactly. You'd have to get really close to see it. You know, as long as they're maintaining the same stylistic features and buttons and things like that. But that's where it's like to see kind of some in person to get a better feel instead of just going by it's fiberglass, it's Fibrex, it's aluminum clad. Go more of this line of windows does achieve that look or doesn't achieve that look. But as far as the language in this guidelines, I think it's,
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I have any notes on it.
Okay. And again, these are the guidelines, so when it comes down to each property and the, you know, decision that's made and the questions that are asked, I think that's where we can start to sort of delve into those things.
And I think there's a lot of information in here and of what these different types are,
Mm-hmm.
and then kind of what our feeling is towards the alternative materials, without being too specific of saying like we definitely prefer this one over this one.
Yeah.
We, you know, it gives us enough room, but also giving some sort of a direction to a
Mm-hmm.
homeowner.
Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts or feelings on doors and windows? No? Okay. Keep going. Energy efficiency kind of blends in with the windows a little bit. External lighting fixtures, which I'm pretty sure is either a not reviewed or a staff reviewed. I don't know if we want to add any more there.
Yeah, it looks like it's only staff reviewed if it's a new fixture or removal of a historic one,
Mm.
or freestanding like a light post, but replacement's not. And it's just staff review.
Okay. Fences.
Can I take us totally off the rails for just a second?
Yes.
I just saw a picture that reminded me of another thought. Going back to the urbanistic thing,
Mm-hmm.
we have in our infill review, in the ordinance for infill review, a requirement that houses basically adhere to the setback line of the block.
Mm.
So you're in TNR, your setback allowance off the street is from 10 feet to 25 feet. But if you are subject to infill review, you really should be aligning the front of your house to what the other houses are. There's an example on 11th Street of a new build, I believe it is, that's right across the street from like 119, and another house that I just saw on the document that is so far out of the setback of the block, it's just craziness. And I don't know the reasoning for it, but my point is that somehow infill review did not prevent that.
Okay.
And so if that's happening within the historic district, this could be another firewall
Mhm.
against that risk.
Okay.
And that's actually a better example than the examples I mentioned before about the urbanistic aspect of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that gives a little bit more, to me, that gives a little bit more weight to that bullet point that I was talking about before.
Is that the house that was built on the old tennis courts of the Washington School
Could be.
property?
Could be. It's real close to Washington School. It's on
Yeah,
south
it's the
side.
house, of course, it's got that giant blank wall that drives me nuts.
That
You know, when you're walking east, it's just
Mhm.
this Yeah,
And it's out of the setback
yeah.
range by probably 12 feet.
Yeah, because the house next to it, yeah. Yeah, it's odd because it's just out there, yeah.
So that pertains to new build, which isn't very common, but it
Mhm.
happens,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, it's 122.
Yeah. Yeah, so it has that empty lot west of it,
Mhm.
or kind of it was a very narrow lot, but, yeah. We were just discussing, John, how many of the historic district commissioners' houses have to be in this guideline.
see,
So
yeah.
far, you're the only ones I've seen, so. I don't know
Mar-
if you had to
Pardon
pay
my
to get
lateness,
yours.
but I walked in and see my own.
Yeah, right.
That was approved, by the way.
Yeah.
But was it not supposed to be?
The shining
No,
example.
Okay.
It's,
Oh,
But
It's a
actually,
very
one change
visible
is, the
fence.
building department, not us, but the building department told me to put it right at the sidewalk.
Oh.
And now I
Fence,
think they're
yeah.
telling people to go back a foot.
a foot, yeah.
But that's,
That's a good,
Change.
that's a good call.
yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of our fences are back behind the house, usually not in view, which is what our guidelines actually say, you know, in the front yard, limited fencing.
Mhm.
But so, thought it was a good picturing for this one.
mhm.
And then this is a drawing that was done for previous design guidelines by Holland. And a little statement on alternative materials. And that brings us back here to flat concrete work, which we kind of talked a little bit about earlier. And its statement.
Would it be a good idea, so this really says we're concerned about it and we'd like to take
Mm-hmm.
authority over it, but we don't actually say what we would like to see.
See, right.
Is that something we feel like we should expand on? And
What is the fear with this topic?
I think if you
Parking in the front yard.
front yard,
That's protected by the ordinance.
yeah,
We don't have to worry about it because the ordinance doesn't allow that.
Anymore.
I'm trying to find.
Now,
the
you could
section.
use my argument about the setbacks in the same way and say, well, yeah, but the ordinance doesn't always catch everything.
So this talks about lengthening or widening an existing driveway, new curb cut driveway in front of the house, or
But does driveway and flat work, I mean, are we talking about the same thing? Are we talking about sidewalks here? Like we have a side walk alongside the house?
like private walkways.
A
yeah.
private walk.
Mhm.
There's like,
It's listed here too.
next door to John, I think I could see where the problem could end up, was like they all the time have like 5-6 cars over there. And so now they're parking on the lawn next to the driveway and next to the
Mhm.
fence.
But
And
that's
then if
also,
that's all paved in, that, you know, I don't know how that's kosher or not.
it's not. The city has the city would forbid that paving.
Code
They have
enforcement's supposed to, or even not, but what's happening a lot of times with houses is it's not paved and cars still just kind of go off to the side and park in the grass until eventually it just becomes gravel.
but that's
And it should be code enforcement.
that's code enforcement, and paving it is
An ordinance.
those guys over there, and they would not allow that.
Yeah.
There's a guideline for this on the website. If you just go to CNS webpage, there's several guidelines, including driveways and paving, that spell all that out.
Yeah. So I guess all of the in the above section where it talked about review by, all of it lists other review or permits needed, that it needs zoning approval or land use permit, curb cut approval. So everything's does have kind of
Has
some other kind of approval
Mhm.
on it.
I just typed in cns.com. It didn't take me to.
It's a railroad website, or?
I don't know what it was.
Canadian National.
So I'm hearing that maybe this is one that, you know, we, at least at this time,
Mhm.
wouldn't include, and we could revisit it in the future.
Right.
If we were to determine
Do
risks or concerns.
I guess, Nick, do we feel like, yeah, is there any concern
I,
that something could get approved through, you know, that wouldn't be protected by an ordinance or by some other department, that we would go, oh, you know, we wish we would have had something that said that's not what we intend, that's not what we'd like to see.
to me, I think that one is so on their radar on a daily basis that that
Mhm.
one does
They're pretty
high
strict on that
likelihood
already.
of getting caught. Whereas my setback example,
Yeah.
I could see how that could slip through because it goes through the infill review process. So
Yeah.
it's not exactly the same thing, but
Mhm.
I'm just trying to make the point that like there is a protection against paving your front yard.
Mm-hmm.
And if it allows us to simplify our document by not having to, you know, be redundant, there's value
That's
there. But
better.
if you're concerned about it, I don't feel
No.
strongly
Well,
that it
I-
should be in there.
Mm-hmm.
If it's covered, then it's not good to be redundant. I agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
And if it would be reviewed before it ever got to us.
So is there anything though that we would say, that we'd wanna say we have a recommendation on? So say somebody has like an original 2-track, or not original, cause it's probably not, nothing's original with flat work anymore, but, or, you know, pavers or something like that, that they said, I'm gonna tear this out and just put concrete full. Is there anything that obviously they could get that done and get that approved? Is there anything that we would wanna say, no, we really wanna see that maintained?
I don't know. I just sent you the driveway thing.
Okay.
I mean, I'd be fine taking the whole thing out or removing the part that says, that's more of a thing to us, recommended the HGC be given authority.
Mm-hmm.
That's paragraph, that shouldn't be in the document that is just out there for public consumption.
That was one of my concerns
Yeah,
also.
so
was
I
the
take that
language,
out
yeah.
and then leave, if you want to leave the paragraph that just describes kind of how we feel about flat concrete work, but again, I'm kind of with Nick that if we've already have enough levels of protections, I mean, I'm just trying to think of, you know, if somebody had a brick driveway, which I've seen a few around, I wouldn't say to them, okay, you can't take out a brick driveway and put in a concrete driveway, because I sure wouldn't want to shovel a brick driveway personally.
Right.
Good point.
So
Yeah.
the width of the driveway, you know, like ours was originally, I think, 8 feet wide, and when we had it replaced, we made it 10. And you know, I get a little annoyed if somebody's got a 25-foot driveway, but you know, I don't know.
Right.
Again, that's an ordinance issue to
Mhm.
me. So I don't know. I'm willing to let flat concrete work go. If they want to build an apron around their in-ground pool, that's probably in their backyard, so we don't care.
But yeah, there's also a provision that says you can't basically have impervious beyond a certain percentage lot
Oh,
coverage.
Yeah.
And if you ask Tricia why that is, she'll say because people make their yards in the parking lots in the back.
Sure.
Which our neighbor does without having to pave it.
Yeah, I've seen plenty of those that.
Yeah, parallel
They're-
parking in their backyard.
Mhm.
You have enough to,
Okay, yeah, so I
information.
think I'm hearing we're going to remove it.
yeah,
Mhm.
sounds good. Pave it over.
Garages. So, Mark, if you'd like to talk about this a little bit more, or I can, but you had the suggestion
Yeah,
about
I
roof
just,
lines?
I guess in thinking about garages, I'm wondering, how hard or should we be pushing a little bit on the design? One comes to mind is one we approved on the corner of 9th and Royalty, kind of a curves around like Collin Park there. And that's a kind of a hip roof house, kind of a low house, kind of an attractive house that faces on that corner, and they built a gable roof garage, and they haven't painted it, which doesn't help because it's just unfinished wood, but it just really sticks at me every time I walk by that house. And I think, a hip roof garage would have just blended in a little bit better. I think the garage roof might be higher than the house roof. I can't remember now, but anyway, there are certainly many examples in the historic district of gable garages and a hip roof, vice versa. So I guess I'm just struggling in my mind. How would I have thought about that differently if I'd have seen that garage built? And I thought, well, we could have done a little better job, not we, but the homeowner making that blend better. I don't know, that's just
An issue with that one though too was that he had a garage that was stuck way forward.
right.
And he was agreeing to move it back, so I
Right.
think that pleased us so much that we
Yeah.
sort of dropped the ball with
Yeah.
saying, how about a hip roof? And
Wasn't it your favorite tree that
That's my favorite tree.
distracted us?
Yeah,
It's the most horizontal tree I've ever seen.
right.
Got a branch that just goes and goes and goes, like so. It's unbelievable.
As a competitor
Yeah,
on
it really
State
does.
Street.
I've never noticed that.
It's
Yeah.
really surprising
Yeah.
Yeah.
to see it.
It does defy gravity.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well,
That's really bizarre.
That
They say-
the Google picture makes it
A little,
way
yeah.
A
exaggerated.
little exaggerated, yeah.
Anyway, I just would be,
I think that's what happened.
yeah, right.
And we
But I
do
just
that
wonder
better.
if we maybe just having a loose idea of it being somehow compatible with the house is enough. I just, you don't want to make policy because of one garage, but, and I think Nick has helped me understand the difference between the massing of the roof line, being slightly, I can't remember how you talked about it, but somehow instead of exactly matching a gable roof, it's not bad to have a slightly different pitch so that it has a kind of a submissive, if that's the right word, characteristic.
Yeah.
And I like that thought that, the garage is subordinate to the house. And again, that particular house, I feel like the garage is, if not dominating the house, it's kind of,
It doesn't feel right
yeah,
with that site.
yeah,
That I've noticed that one a number of
Yeah.
times too. Like, whoa, that's how that turned out.
yeah. So I don't know, that's why I just threw that out there is there anything more we want to say? Or, again, you have the subordinate in there, and maybe we just need to do a little more pushing on designs. One of the things that is interesting, and I guess that's a lot to ask somebody with a garage, is to have a drawing that shows the house in relation to or the garage in relation to the house, because again, to beat that dead horse, it just looks different than seeing the garage by itself and saying, here's a garage design. When you look at it next to the house, it's really different than just seeing it in. So maybe even that
Yeah.
requirement to say, please have
Or,
us-
or a picture at least.
yeah, that's
of
what I
the
mean.
house,
Have
a
them,
more updated picture.
like you can Photoshop the garage, scale it into the house picture, and see. And,
I think that was
That's a
part of
good
the
point.
problem there at 11th and Vinalty.
Yeah.
Is that we saw the drawing and not compared to the house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you have-
That's the one I thought you were talking about at
I was
first.
Oh,
thinking
the
of that
AUD,
too.
yeah, or ADU. I mean, that's another. I get it. We can have a whole section on that. So, well, we're going to get to that later, but anyway, yeah.
Mhm.
So anyway, I guess maybe that's just a long-winded way of saying if we are all comfortable that we kind of maybe are more aware of that now, and when we get garage proposals, thinking about what would help us be better, help the client or the home.
I feel like we've had some success too with saying, would you consider 2 single doors instead of a big double
Yeah,
door?
yeah.
And at least sometimes I think we've gotten.
Mhm.
Do these have to go to infill review? Garages?
Garages? That's a good question. I'm not sure.
Because that could be another way that infill review comes in, and because like if infill review goes well, they will pick up on things like that sometimes. But it's kind of out of our scope. I'm just trying to think about. This is a nuancey thing.
Yeah.
You're
yeah.
trying to tell the resident like, oh yeah, it should be like
Yeah.
subordinate, but it needs to feel like it belongs. And they're like, well,
Mhm.
what about this
Yeah.
truss that I have off the shelf? That's what happened with that garage.
Right, no,
It's like-
yeah, you're right, it was,
Those trusses are cheap.
yeah,
You're right.
yeah.
Mm.
Well, again, if we have enough room to just as a commission, maybe be a little more cautious when we get those or think of some ways to help us, that's all I'd be thinking about,
Mhm.
rather than trying to detail every possible permutation in there, so.
Mhm.
I do like this picture because of the two doors.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah,
a
that's
good
what I know.
handy reference
It's a good
baked
picture,
into
yeah.
the design guideline.
And they look like sliding doors. I'm sure they're not.
They were, because I looked to see
Yeah?
but if they were original or not. They're not. They have a COA, but it's from the early 2000s, I'd say, and
Sure.
it was replacing the old doors, which they considered non-functioning with these,
Right.
which were overheads.
But they still have the look.
Yeah, they were
Yeah,
very much
great,
based on
yeah.
the original.
Only Pierre has actual sliding doors.
They're
He does. You don't, when you open one of them, don't you blocking your neighbor while it's open?
No.
Okay.
They had, well, there's 4 stalls there, so
Right.
they had the same dilemma. You can only let one car out at a time. If I go away, then like the wife has to open the door and or close my door and open her door.
My parents had an old 3-stall garage that had sliding doors, but only 2 of them could ever be, at the same time. So you get the cars out and we're moving these doors back and forth. And, yeah, interesting. Okay, do you have enough to? I'd say just leave it as is if
Okay.
everybody's in agreement.
Yep, that's what I was going to ask. If we feel like it's covered,
Yeah, I'm just
yeah, I'm glad we had the conversation.
venting.
Okay, so here's garage doors, which we have a photograph of recessed panel, flat panel, and
The odious
Raised panel.
Raised panel.
any thoughts about how those are presented? It's okay. This is not actually, I don't think either of those are split single doors.
Mm.
The lower one that's across the street from our house, it's one door.
Yeah. Yeah, it's nice because you have the hip roof and the gable roof garage, so that's kind of
Mhm.
nice.
Okay. So we're
Yep,
comfortable
yeah.
with it?
Mhm.
I hesitated even putting a photo of the raised panel in, but I'm hoping it can be there for just an example.
I
and
think
refer
it's
to it.
helpful to say not appropriate.
Yeah,
You're gonna put
that's what we
Anyway,
the red
that's what we
circle with a
mean.
line
Circle
through it
line,
in front
yeah.
of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did that with the fence section about chain link, so.
Yeah.
Or somewhere I saw that. That might have been on the old document.
I think that might be
Yeah.
in the
Little-
old version.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. There it is.
Landscaping and yard improvements did not have any text in it when I received this document. If we recall, I think it's because we do not review anything in this section. So if we have a statement we want to put here, or we just want to remove it entirely. I believe in the review section, the only thing we have is swimming pools or spas if they're in the visible from the public right of way, and maybe garbage enclosures.
Yeah, that's the only thing you have noted as
Yeah.
requiring review.
And I remember when I was originally going through this document, looking to see any like past cases of either of those two things, just to see, and I was unable to find any on the record. Not all of the COAs are digitized and easy to search through, but nothing popped up that I wasn't aware of anything in the district to use as an example.
The only time I've heard reference is when sometimes a homeowner says, "Oh, don't worry about this thing I want to do, it's covered by landscaping." And we usually say, well, landscaping isn't permanent, and we can't guarantee that it will always be shielded or.
I think that might be mentioned in the mechanical equipment section,
Mhm, yeah.
that appropriate screening is used, which there's the case that, yeah, that's not permanent. We can look at that, but
I like the idea of having something in there to just mimic that, hey, we had it in the review section to have
Right.
something
Mhm.
there. But I don't know what we would put there, I guess.
I think the intention with the review portion of it would be for the built-in enclosure would be that it's not connected to the building in any way. I think similar that we would think of fencing. And then for the pools and spas, I think that's
Pretty clear
it's just not fitting in with the characteristics of the rest of the district.
Right.
So I know the reasonings, but there's not quite the detail
Yeah.
that we have for the others.
With just a sentence explaining that, you know, that we don't really have any, I don't know.
Yeah, it's tricky because we don't review landscaping, so even saying, you know, landscaping should be appropriate to the district, well, that's not
Yeah.
really what we're here to
Right,
say.
right. If anything, it would just be a sentence saying that the historic district does not have any authority to review landscaping. But does that contradict
Strict the-
review? So
Which-
let me have it there.
That's an open effort to let them do whatever they want then too.
Right.
Let's just-
What do you think?
We can always remove this and add it back.
Add it back
Yes.
in
Some other
later.
time. We come up with a cool philosophy about it.
Yeah.
Oh, it's right.
So I could put like 15-foot cedar trees all in front of my house?
Yeah, you can.
That would be awful.
I mean, they're gonna take a while to get to 15 feet.
I
Yeah,
won't be able to
there's
see
You
the
want to.
tulips anymore. But yeah.
Yeah, I understand keeping sort of the consistency
Yeah.
between the top section and the bottom section, but also I don't know if we should put words just to have words
Yeah.
if we don't have the words to say.
I get that.
Yeah.
I was hoping somebody would have the words
No,
to say.
I have thought about it a bit to
Yeah.
try and figure out what would exclude some things and include others.
Yeah, it's a weird area.
Okay, so we're comfortable with removing for now.
Mm-hmm.
Masonry foundations and chimneys.
I mean, maybe it means that this commission needs training at some point on that topic, so
Yeah.
that we know what to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
These are diagrams from the Grand Rapids Historic District Commission, which Phil had noted as being
So
good to include.
is Phil saying Phil's saying that there's an incorrect way and a correct way for that mortar joint?
Yes,
Mm.
the one that damages
Okay.
the brick and one that does
Mortar
not.
cleaned out.
Hmm.
Because there's other mortar joints that are decorative.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and often you'd have even a little cove aspect to them when you put it
Yeah.
on a mortar joint, rather than a hard edge, but
It would be hard to make, actually.
yeah. Yeah, we were just down in Texas, and their thing with mortar is to have the mortar actually sticking out
Mhm.
from the brick. Yeah,
Overdone and, yeah,
There's a
squeezing out.
house
Oh, yeah,
over
there we
there.
go.
Mhm.
Yeah, the
as a
concave.
foundation.
Yeah.
Yeah, on like a limestone foundation.
Oh, look at this. Extruded, in other words, is what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
The bead, I've seen, definitely seen that.
Wow.
Mm.
The beaded.
And the concave is what I mostly think of.
Concave. You
Yeah,
see it all
that
the time.
seems like
That's,
it's most.
Yeah,
And then raked is the one that's
Mhm.
showing.
yeah.
Hmm.
So would we want to replace this diagram? Or
Yeah, I mean, it's good that this says what not to do, which is like a haphazard one that
Mhm.
looks like it has a stress concentration in it.
What if we only showed the incorrect?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a good call, because, yeah, otherwise we need mixed diagram.
Mhm.
Approved mortar joints.
that's an easy fix. There were some notes that Phil had left about alternative replacement materials for Waverly Stone and Venaclassen brick, but there were question marks, as in there weren't necessarily known replacements. I don't know. So I removed the mention of that from in here. I feel like it would probably be a conversation that would need to be had case by case depending on the property, but I just wanted to mention it here and gather your thoughts and of.
I was just talking to Dan Tiley about this week, and I think I've shared this with this commission before, but I think that split space fieldstone, it should be allowed and encouraged as a replacement for Waverly Stone. But that's a weird, I understand why that might not be, the obvious choice, but my argument would be it's like for like because it's stone for stone.
Mhm.
Okay.
If we replace wood for wood, we don't go, is that poplar?
Right.
We just go, oh, you did wood again.
Right.
And
Good
field
point.
stone is a native stone to the area, just like Waverly Stone, even though it looks very different. But it does show up on foundations on certain houses too.
Yes, it does.
Does split face just mean it's flat on the side that's
Yeah.
exposed, so it's not the rounded
Yeah.
look, it's just a flat, so just stone facing, but it's,
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
And so like the Van Raalte Dog Park,
Oh, yeah, right.
they
right,
have
yeah.
that on the new little
Yeah,
dog
yeah.
washing pavilion.
Mhm.
And that's why Dan and I were talking about it, because it
Yeah,
turned out
it's-
cool. and
No,
really
it did,
nice.
it's
like,
nice.
Yeah, so that turned out really well.
Yeah.
That part.
Do you wanna add that in as a, okay,
Well, I was gonna say, so
Oh.
right now it says if replacement of masonry materials is necessary, replacement materials shall be the same color, texture, size, type of material as which was being replaced unless it is technically unfeasible to do so. So masonry being brick, but then would we want a specific mention of the stone also here, you think?
here's why I think we should, because this town
Mhm.
has Waverly Stone as an indigenous material, and it's decaying before our very eyes. And we
Yes.
have to be able to tell our applicants, the city included, or non-district but downtown important buildings, like viable solutions.
Okay,
If we say you have to do like for like, but we don't have any real solutions to offer, we're kind of like
Mhm.
full of it.
right.
and
So,
maybe
I
you
don't
could
know,
just
I-
have something like a special note about Waverly Stone, and then kind of just whatever Nick just said.
Yeah.
But I mean, that, it feels like that could be a very specific thing
It
to us.
is.
Yeah,
But I
that's
think
a
we
good
still
point.
can't make any definitive statements though on it. I think we can say could be considered or something like that.
Mhm.
Or
Just
Yeah.
something to open the door.
just to
Mhm.
put
Right.
something as a guideline. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we do feel sort of loyal to Waverly Stone, like we do blueberries or anything else that's so local to us.
Yeah.
But as you say, it does deteriorate, and if you look closely, it's not a real attractive product after a
No,
time.
and also the fieldstone is just as local. Like if we go and plow a field, we'll find more fieldstones than Waverly stones.
Sure.
Right.
That quarry isn't active, is it?
I don't think so. I think it's got water in it.
Full of water.
The Waverly?
Mhm.
Yeah, it's very much probably the river. No.
I mean, we could say, look, we're a city made of Waverly Stone. We need to get that quarry back up and running so we can take care of our city.
Yeah.
If we can get the nuclear plant Palisades going,
yeah,
why not the
right.
Waverly Quarry?
I mean, they're having this problem in Europe. I mean, there's cities in Europe that are built out of one specific kind of stone, which is reaching its design life.
Yeah.
What do you do
Okay.
if your whole entire city, which is like
Yeah.
800 years old,
Right.
is finally reaching its design life? That's like really sad, actually.
Yeah.
The clock tower will have that problem eventually. Graves Hall at Hope
Sure.
College, all these other buildings will.
Did they quarry some new stone though for Graves or no? When they redid it?
They have
didn't
limestone on it, on the 2009 edition. It looks really
Which is
convincing.
more stable, more likely to be?
Yeah, I think it's
Okay.
more stable too, but I don't think it's all that local.
Right, sure.
But it looked nice.
Mhm.
It was a nice addition.
Well, we've had, again, some success with, I'm thinking of Third Church that put stone steps in place, right? That,
Yeah, they did the cast limestone, right?
yeah, I think, and that was a nice,
Yeah, those turned out good.
that was a success, I'd say, for us.
So here's that mechanical equipment
Hmm.
section that we mentioned earlier. I believe most of the things that fall under this category are also staff administrative approvals.
Mhm.
New construction, additions. There's many options of photos for the new construction. This was just one I had.
Good one.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
and it's
Good example.
it's a visible property as well right there in the corner.
Mhm.
And it was a cheap
I
build.
I think that could be a whole, that could be a whole study to look at this house and the ones to the east of it, and then go around the block and look at those houses. And they're all nice houses, but this is what you get with design guidelines, and 10th Street is what you get without. And I'm not making fun of 10th Street, but it's a totally different look. I think there was one on 10th that might have passed muster for the district, but most of them really wouldn't. And this one, I wasn't on the commission then. Nick, were you?
Mm-mm.
I think there was a long discussion that created the two gables that face west.
Really?
Instead of a big block of a thing, that's a long way, that house is a long way north and south.
Mhm.
And if that had been one big gable, well, first of all, it wouldn't have been 15 feet higher in the air. And I think that our commission suggested the two gables, and I think that again is a success for us.
That is, yeah.
Mhm.
The way that house responds to both Maple Avenue and the green
Mhm.
with the two gables, it's really pretty successful.
Mhm.
And I think every one of those houses that faces south are great. I mean, I think they're,
And they used almost every siding possible, from narrow to wide to vertical on the house.
okay, yeah.
It's like a little mini mini showroom for.
On the 11th Street side though, or?
Down the
both?
Maple Avenue side, there's
On-
three.
this
three
house.
widths of the siding. Yes.
Oh, okay, all
And then
right.
there's
Yeah.
vertical where the garage is, so it's kind of an interesting. I mean.
I talked to the designer about that.
Okay.
And he said he wanted to have a time component, that was
Okay.
his words, about that to suggest that garage might be a little bit more primitive
Mm.
than like the refined
Yeah,
and elegant
yeah.
house.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, it was just interesting to.
It has certain, from certain views, it has a lot going on. It's an interesting house.
Yeah.
And then the other photo is of the one on 15th Street.
Mhm. It's another success for us, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she's come back to ask even small things. She's been very cooperative.
So here's the painting section,
Okay.
which we do not.
This is a great picture because it'll never get old.
That's permanent. That's the one thing that is
Yeah,
permanent.
right.
Death, taxes, and that set of scaffolding.
I'm sorry.
So we don't have any oversight over painting, but receive questions. So it's mentioned in a couple of different places that we do not review paint colors, but I think it makes sense to still offer guidance, especially when people are looking for it.
Very much.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
So that's what this section.
The only thing I wonder is like you have the note that it's not regulated by us
Down
listed
here.
under guidelines at the very beginning. So
Okay.
maybe that should just be before guidelines start,
Okay.
and then do not paint masonry is guideline number 1.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah, do you feel
That's an
like we
improvement.
have
Yeah.
control over what's going on with paint in the district right now?
No,
Like,
but
are you comfortable with this situation?
that we don't have control over it, you're saying?
Over paint or over color?
Color. We were talking, might have been before you got here, John, that
Yeah.
people are just painting everything blue and white right now, and
We
we're
should have a
losing.
quota.
Yeah.
We're way past our
Sorry,
quota.
you're over the blue, yeah, I get you.
And there are historic
Yeah.
color palettes.
Well, right, and let me say this, because I went through this process not knowing any of you. I wanted some help with paint, and I was really, and I wasn't just told, okay, we don't do that, I was really rebuffed. In fact, I think I have something in writing that says, well, there are some books in the library if you want to know. And I know there's books in the library to begin with, but it was like the effort was made to say, we are not going to regulate you in color, but I would have liked to. I got lucky and
Yeah.
found the backside of some paint and then shot it and chose it, but
Do you think this, I mean, because it is kind of broken down in this guideline section of the style of home, what could be appropriate. So Gothic revival, use of natural earth tones is most appropriate, those kind of things.
Yeah.
well, so
So there's some,
could we
but
provide a palette in that Gothic revival, or a little? I don't know. Maybe we're going too far.
yeah.
I like the verbiage a lot. I just wish we could push it on people a little more.
We wish we had
Well,
authority.
here's a sample. Okay, I mean, I'm reading the Gothic revival, I kind of understand what it means, but if you also handed me a spray of colors like so, I'd think, great, I bet I'll find something I like. I mean, a complementary color I sort of understand, but I don't think everyone does.
Yeah,
So-
it's just hard right now because there's so many houses being painted blue and white and white and
Yeah.
black.
White and black, yeah.
Mhm.
Right. That 203 got redone dramatically,
Yeah.
but
I'm trying to think of if somebody wants to paint their house blue, they're gonna just do it, if we don't have any authority.
And do we have something on Craftsman? Bungalows.
Bungalows.
Doesn't say earth tones.
Yeah.
That's what happened to that.
Yeah, I know. It's goodbye earth
That
tones.
one.
which,
The one that's right over here.
okay, yeah.
It faces Hope Church parking lot.
Yeah. So maybe it's a staff thing. I don't think we want to make people come to a meeting and show them those colors.
Right.
But could we somewhere in our, could staff have that?
So I'm wondering if maybe that would be like a separate resource of color palettes, but
Mhm.
again, I think we'd want to be
Mhm.
careful because again, we're not like it would be something for people to reference, but it would need a lot of the disclaimers that they don't need a COA for it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And right now, nobody needs any approval from anybody to paint their house. Like, they can just do it. So that's why I'm wondering, like, even if we have these resources and these palettes,
Some are going to
Will
slip
they
through,
be
of
used?
course.
At what point is somebody coming to the city to say, I'm going to paint my house?
Hmm.
Yeah.
I want to.
I think I've been approached by maybe one or two people the whole time I've been here
Really?
about, do you have
But, well,
paint?
okay, but
And
I
I've
remember
shared this,
thinking,
Yeah.
the draft of this with them.
So if they are
Okay.
looking and asking, then it's
Yeah.
helpful, but yeah, if we don't have the approval, and there's no way to get approval or something like that, right? Or,
What goes to this?
It'd be an
Authority
yeah,
question.
yeah,
an
that's what
ordinance
I'm
amendment.
wondering if it's something we feel like we need to discuss.
I mean, you could paint one of the Capital Village houses if you wanted, right?
Uh,
We do
we-
say about not
we
being
don't paint
brick.
brick if it's
Yeah.
not been
In the
painted.
masonry it is.
But you can still do it, right?
No,
I
I don't.
think we
I don't
consider
think we
it
can
like
paint
a
brick.
change to a characteristic.
I think
Define
because
feature.
it's the brick, that's
Okay.
what would separate that, and it would fall under the masonry standards for
I
review.
think
Okay.
one page up, we had a comment
See,
on not painting brick that hasn't been
300
painted.
Yeah, I didn't know if that was in the spirit of a
Right there.
guideline
Oh,
or a
okay.
rule.
In the, at 300 Washington, right around the corner from me,
Yes,
they wanted to paint the house gray.
yes, they did, and
And we said no,
we gently said, no, I don't think that's right.
so they sold it.
Yeah.
They were gonna sell it anyway.
Yeah.
I kind of.
Yeah. So in the painting review section, we have a section that says painting of previously unpainted exterior masonry materials is required for
Okay,
HDC review.
Mhm.
that's good. And do we say anything about lime washes on masonry?
I don't think so.
I think that would fall into the same painting / lime wash. I think would be. Is that something we feel like we should add to
I
just
think
clarify?
it'd be much better to lime wash a brick house than paint it.
What is lime washing, just to
So I'm
clean
gonna
it?
pull up a picture.
Is that something we should change the language of in this section to say painting / lime washing of previously unpainted?
I
Or
think so, that makes sense to me. I mean, I think it's a good point. If we don't know what Nick means by it, then how can we expect it?
So this is a lime wash brick house. It's new,
Oh,
and it's actually it's what they do in Europe, and it lets the masonry still breathe.
okay.
but it is fairly not reversible.
It's not reversible. Yes, it is. The lime wash, you can actually get it
Really?
off. Yeah,
So if we were up close, I would think it's just painted white, right?
you would probably think it's like
Painted off.
painted white.
Okay. Okay, yeah.
So I can make it say painting / lime wash, come for
Well,
review.
okay.
There's a house on 20 by me that attempted a white lime wash on a reddish brick.
Mm,
it's
and the
not-
red can't-
It's pink now.
Yes.
And when
that's
it
right.
rains, it looks.
Really? When it rains, it looks pinker, and
But they
then
can
when it
apply
dries?
more lime wash.
Yeah, they
Okay.
just didn't put a thick
Well,
coat on it or.
Maybe we need to say more about this.
So
I wasn't familiar with it, I just,
it is something that, yeah, I think we'd review it and discuss if it's
Yeah.
something that's appropriate for that situation.
But I think it is a relevant topic because of the longevity of Waverly Stone. Once again, if we really are serious about protecting Waverly Stone for the next 100 years, we're going to have to adopt.
Is a lime washing a
It's a protective
measure?
Yes.
and is that the only color it can come out, or
I think it comes in a
Okay.
fairly narrow palette.
Okay.
I mean, it's like white and then like
it's
off
light?
white.
Okay,
It's not like all kinds
not
of
gonna make it a
colors.
dark green or something, that's, okay.
We don't have to get all into that right now. But
No, but I think that's an example of something that we can improve. If somebody comes up to us with the idea of painting their brick, we can improve that request.
yeah, exactly. I
Mhm.
100% agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay to move on?
Mhm.
So we have porches.
Hmm?
Any thoughts or concerns?
Yeah, I think there needs to be more language about the columns. He talks about the Doric and the Tuscan and all these different kinds of columns further down.
Is it further down? Okay.
Yeah.
It's a pretty robust
Post
section.
columns.
Yeah.
The
Keep
very
going
like,
down.
last section, I think.
Oh.
It's all the railing. I think it's at the very bottom.
Yeah, one more page down. Keep going.
Keep going. Steps, girding.
going.
Lots to say about porch.
Yeah, it's a big section. Checking right there, there's
Fiberglass
porch
porch
columns.
columns.
So that section that goes to vinyl as well.
Yeah, more fiberglass columns on the market are designed mimic classical orders such as Tuscan, Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian.
Mm-hmm.
So this is like non-negotiable. They cannot be straight. If they're round, they have to have that taper to
Okay.
them. And they have to have that condition that I emailed everybody where the neck is flush with the beam.
Mhm.
I just emailed that to you again.
Okay.
But it might not be law, but it should definitely be a guideline
Oh,
if
I
they're
think
using
so.
any of those.
Yeah.
We can be a little bit more flexible if they're using like a Queen Anne turned post, but that's not what these ones are talking about.
Okay.
The ones that are classical need to be done in a proper classical manner.
So, should that be added to this statement? Is that
Yes.
what you're thinking? Okay.
Yes.
Any other thoughts on this section?
Well, okay, yeah, on, page 69, the, under the heading newel post, it said, they should generally correspond to other porch posts on thickness and whether round or square. Where porch posts are turned, square newel posts are recommended. Should that be not recommended?
Mm.
Good question.
I mean, it doesn't seem like you'd want to have square
Mhm.
newel posts with turned porch posts, right?
Seems like an odd thing to have as a guideline.
Yeah, we can.
I mean, whether you
change
take it out, but am I thinking about that right? That really what the person or what the sentence is trying to say is if they should match. So if you have turned porch posts, you should have turned newel posts, not the opposite, which is what it says now.
What's the rest of that last sentence? Here we go.
Turn
newel
newel posts are not recommended under circumstance.
What's going on over
It's mass wall masonry, so there's just
Something wrong with that.
Yeah.
super thick masonry walls.
Under any circumstance, probably.
There's a-
All right,
Well,
no,
'cause
under
turned would be okay.
Turn-
turn
yeah, I
newel
don't
posts
think
I never
turned would
recommend,
be-
or
Firms that are
yeah. So I don't even know what that is. Under in that.
What do you
circumstance.
think, Nick? I think that
Or it said,
sentence that's,
turn newel posts are recommended. Well, I don't know. Maybe we just want to leave those sentences out, but
I think we're missing a not, and then that sentence isn't very useful.
yeah, you could just take that sentence out.
So it originally said turned newel posts are not recommended under any circumstance, or at least the
Okay.
draft before it was moved to this.
So really turned newel posts are not recommended.
Wonder why.
That's just weird. To me anyway.
Are they talking about like the post at the base of a stair railing or like a midsection? They're talking about newel post, not a full
Oh,
post,
maybe I
right?
see what you mean, like, yeah.
'Cause they're not
you
talking
would
about the
have the
full column
ornamentation
post.
on the top of it, but not, the whole thing wouldn't be a turned post. In fact, didn't they do that on, there's some house recently, I think it was that house on 16th Street where they added those really overdone Victorian Newell, for the Newell posts are turned and
Oh, yeah.
have all that design on them, so maybe that's what this was trying to get at. Is the Newell post only the end one at the
Newell
base
post-
of the
I
stairs?
feel like
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's-
typically.
Not actually
Yeah.
in this.
It's
diagram.
just up to the
Right.
railing
Yeah,
height.
right,
It's
right.
not a full
Yeah,
supporting post.
yeah, okay, well, maybe
I think of it as the terminus of the
Uh-huh.
something.
Right, right, okay.
balustrade. or
So I
something.
guess they were trying to forestall that 16th Street thing then, saying we shouldn't have that full turn post. Okay, well,
Do you know why though, Nick? Is there any architectural?
I don't know why, but it seems awfully specific. It's kind of like my column neck thing in my header. It's like I'm insisting on it, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know about this one. I don't know where
Phil
the-
was passionate about it, but we're
Yeah.
not sure why.
We could ask him.
Yeah, can do that.
so originally there was a knot after that, the square Newell
But
post.
they're not, or are not recommended under any circumstance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It may just be a pattern recognition thing where he's studied it and realized that that's just not done.
Yeah. Well, why don't you just highlight that and then we can check into it, but
Yeah.
we have struggles with people just not put, as long as they don't put in, they think a 4x4 would be perfect because it's not turned, you know? Just put in a green 4x4
Nice
with
green.
a deck
There you
railing
go.
on it and they're ready to go.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, I will reach out to Phil about that and hopefully he can clarify.
I have a small point on page 75, if we're done with that section.
Or yeah, we can.
On 75, we have all these little roof examples,
Mhm.
and for some reason, I couldn't find just a regular hip roof, and then I realized this section has hip and valley, and I just wondered why that particular drawing has a complicated thing, you know, with this extra, you know, appendage added and stuff with the valleys, and just not a simple hip roof, like all the other roofs are just very simple, and I don't know, it just seemed like that was a little more, I don't know, maybe that hip and valley is a thing that's different than hip roof, but we have pyramid hip, and then it seems like regular hip, and we don't need the valleys and the, anyway.
No, yes, so this is coming again from the Grand Rapids Historic District
Yeah.
Commission's guidelines. And it was one of the like
Sure.
highlighted
Yeah,
diagrams.
right.
I can see what else is out there.
Well, I mean, I'd be happy to, I could edit that and just make it a hip roof without the
Okay.
valley, if you want.
There's a different version of this diagram that's in the old Holland
Okay.
Yeah.
guidelines that's much more simple. I think there's fewer
Mhm.
roof options.
I think it comes from McAllister, the field guide, and we don't need like butterfly roof.
Right, it's
Yeah,
just
some
a
of
where is it?
those
Yeah.
are those something we.
Or skillion and lean-to roof.
Mhm.
What would be really cool is if we could get the real types, which I don't know how we go about doing that, but like the Holland parlor and the gabled L and like all of those like layout types.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That would be really handy. One time, I heard some older gentleman talking about the house, like it's the house of Holland. Like you have all seen it more than any other house. It's like the little gabled vernacular kind of Queen Anne, but not really embellished.
Not fussy.
Not fussy, not as big as a real Queen Anne.
Mhm.
You know, just that like classic Holland house, and he had a name for it. And I can't remember what he called it, but I would kill to know what.
Mhm.
It's like, oh yeah, that's whatever. And I was like,
Yeah.
there it is. That's what it's called. And I've never been able to encounter it since. But if we
No,
could-
I'd be interested in that too, and especially the survey sheets that were done use terms that sometimes aren't identified in here,
Yeah.
and so that would also be interesting.
I never heard upright and wing before I lived in Holland. It's a good term, I understand what it is, but
yeah, but
Never heard it
that's a good example of
Mhm.
those types of terms.
Yeah, I would love, I mean, our house is probably one of those, it's just, I call it a cross house, but it's just, if you look at it from
Cross
above, it's a
gable.
cross, it's gabled
right.
and then it has a bay window on one side and a porch on the other, and you just see that house over and over again in Holland. And-
Yeah, and the other thing you see a lot in Holland is that detail where it's chamfered on the main floor
Yeah, right.
and it's not
Yeah.
chamfered
Yes,
upstairs.
correct.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Is that like?
It seems
is that
like
as
a lot of
common-
bother.
Is that well? It does.
Yeah, no, I've seen it other places. I've seen, yeah.
As commonly.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I think it must have been an era though, like a 10-year period or something that.
Yeah, for sure.
But it seems like such a bother to lose part of your house. You have to
Yeah.
build a basement that way.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I didn't mean to open a can of worms, but I like Nick's idea of just having field guide to Holland houses, you know? Classic Holland
Yeah.
houses, especially the ones that don't fall into that real,
Right.
okay, we're a Queen Anne or a
Mhm.
Federalist revival or a Tudor reimagined. Anyway, I guess back to this thing, do we want something just simpler, you know, we could take out even the combination roof, which looks like a Japanese home. I can think of one on facing Lake Makatawa out by the yacht club, but that's the only one I know of in Holland.
What was it, man?
Oh, the combination roof was a really Japanese design,
Okay.
you know.
Oh, yeah, yeah, I know.
Japan all the time, but
Mhm.
not
Yep.
in downtown, and not in the Holland Historic District.
I know exactly that. Is.
Although I guess the Dutch, I don't know what the difference between that and the Dutch gable roof is.
Those.
Well, I don't know.
But in that one, Nick, wasn't that front, was it kind of enclosed or? Yeah, that porch, oh, it's still a porch, okay, yeah.
No, is that what they call the L house?
Gabled L.
Gabled L, at least I know that.
I've heard it that, but I'm telling you, I heard it even cooler term.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but that's a
Sounded-
different house than the one, like our house has it's straight on, the porch isn't, well, it's offset to one side of the front, but it basically has this, exact same pattern on both sides of the house, so.
What's your address, Mark?
144 West 12th Street.
12, what do you say? 12 squared, 12?
12 squared, 12th Street, right. Love that address.
I love that. You should get a little square. Yeah, that's cool.
Is it completely symmetric? It is, isn't it?
Yeah, the difference
Oh,
is
yeah.
it has a small bay window on one side
Right.
of the gable that sticks out. And the original porch was within the, was just a slanted porch, back in the
Mhm.
1800s. But if you look at that house, you see it over and over
Mhm.
again in Holland.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, it's not much different than,
That's like Joni's house that I was kind of mimic, but yeah.
Well, I'd say leave this in there unless we come up with something better for you, because otherwise we
Okay.
can discuss it all night.
Mark, this is your
You-
house.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
do you think, Nick, you'd find that term if you found somebody's intensive, what's it
The
called?
research
wondering
sheets, yeah.
Could be noted on there.
Yeah,
From
because
a
those sometimes have
previous
some
view.
language that I wasn't real.
Yeah.
That's where I first saw the upright and wing.
I have no idea.
We have a glossary in this document,
Oh.
and I don't know off the top of my head if those terms are included. I don't think they are, but maybe that could be a starting point. I don't know. Yeah.
I did find that the intensive research is available online, so if you
Yeah,
think of
they're
an
all on
address,
the city
we'll go
website.
there. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm hearing leave it for now, but potentially find a better, more Holland-specific replacement in the future.
I think that Be good.
I just looked to see if there was the more simplified version in the guidelines we currently have up. It's not, so it must be from an even previous version, I think. Okay.
Oh, one other thing, what about dormer types?
Good call.
Yes.
Because there's actually quite a few different dormer types that we have in the district.
And we'll learn some cool new terms, I bet, in the process. Doghouse, shed. Is that a doghouse?
What's a doghouse?
Just-
I know I've heard it, but maybe that's what that is, where it says dormer roof.
There's
I'll say just a
eyebrow.
gable.
Gable?
That's a gable, yeah, I don't think it has to say.
Well, there's a dormer that I just saw while I was clicking around, and it was unique. And I won't be able to find it again, but it'd be nice to catalog the like Mark said, field guide to Holland. Like, and it'd be nice to catalog the dormers.
Oh, there's like, I think it's called an eyebrow one on.
There's an eyebrow,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
You don't see those very often.
Okay, strike doghouse, I think it just looks like a gable.
Because there's a dog in the window.
Yeah.
It just looks like.
'Cause you can't say cat house.
Yeah, right.
The window is where the
Yeah.
dog enters.
It looks the same.
Yeah, the one on Sturkin's house kind of has the arched
Yeah.
dormers on it, so it does have that little doghouse look. The Fido roof.
So would we want dormers in this document right now, or do we also want that as, I'm almost hearing of like a separate, like you said, like a field guide to Holland kind of thing that maybe could happen? I mean, I think it would have a place with the guidelines, but
That's cool.
They look almost organic.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a vocabulary issue that, you know, it becomes a can of worms, and that's why there is a field guide.
Yeah.
But
I don't like that.
I don't know. I don't feel strongly with. I think
It's winking at you.
I don't know. I think we want to be careful about having too many documents.
Right. Mm-hmm.
If, you've got a section that's headed dormers, if you just added a little description of, common dormers in there, is that where it would be appropriate right now?
We do have dormer section. We don't really,
I mean, you
we don't
don't.
define the types of
Right,
dormers.
but if somewhere else where there's more distinction of something, I mean, it seems like that would be the place where you could just add it now,
Mhm.
common dormer types, and then, shed, eyebrow, whatever.
Yeah, I think sometimes having those terms and visuals is helpful to homeowners to communicate with us and everybody be kind of on the same page about what they're mentioning.
I've never seen it before, but there's a hip dormer.
Mm-hmm.
Makes it a little
Just what it
less
sounds like.
intrusive.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, aren't those common on craftsman houses, the hip dormers? Shed dormers too, but,
Yeah, had it just right there.
And there's a recessed dormer, which to me looks like a water hazard.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
It's set back into the,
yeah.
I can see it from there. So if you open that window, you got a little flat spot in
Oh,
front of
yeah.
it, and
Yeah.
it doesn't look good. So-
I've seen those houses, yeah.
Any other roof thoughts? This is where we include solar panels, which
Mhm.
we've now seen. And this
Have-
is the language that I had shared at that meeting as part, sort of to help guide us. And it seemed to work out pretty okay. And also gutters. And there's another diagram.
Check out It's not the same one, but that's the type. It's like, what's that?
Yeah, I don't know what that's
It's
doing.
like a sunken dormer.
It's like
kind
it
of
wants
within the
to
roof
be
line.
in the roof, but it's also a dormer.
Don't quite know what it's doing.
Any other thoughts on the roof section? Okay, then. Satellite dishes and antennas. Not much to say here other than the back.
Right.
And siding. So, speaking of blue and white houses,
There you go.
Oh my.
well, I feel like this one, this was a more recent one. I was
Right.
here for it. I really liked how it illustrated removing the siding and seeing
Yeah.
what was underneath. While it's perhaps visually not the most compelling
It's-
one,
It's an improvement.
yeah,
Yeah,
I agree.
the sort of the background
And I liked
behind
our
it.
process because we said, would you consider doing this?
Yeah.
We didn't slap their hand and say you can't, or,
Right.
you know, how about peeling that off and seeing? And apparently the wood was in better condition than,
They were really good to work with.
uh-huh.
Yeah. But that would have been a good
Still quality.
opportunity to like bring up a, hey, by the way, color-wise,
Yes.
would you consider or think about?
Yeah. And color was not.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah,
I
we
didn't even think of it. I
even think
didn't-
of it, but yeah, it would have been a good time to.
Well, as great as they were at taking our suggestion of peeling it and checking wood.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sure they would have taken another
Mhm.
suggestion if we'd.
Yeah, I haven't seen that.
um,
I probably have seen the house,
It's
but I
not
haven't.
enhanced.
I went to take this picture when 10th Street was torn up, so you can actually see it's a dirt road in
Oh,
front
right.
of it. So
Yeah.
that's right when that house
That's
finished,
right.
and that's when
Yeah.
I was out doing some recon photos.
That's
last
probably
summer.
why, like, I never saw the in process.
Right.
And it just went, and it just fits in. It doesn't stand out as, oh, this house
Yeah.
just got new
Right.
siding
Yeah.
or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
It's funny.
So I had put a note to Anna about this, the idea of whether we can ask for a look at what's underneath before we approve what they're gonna do. And this relates specifically to that house on 11th and Van Royalty, where I think we approved, you know, the replacement siding, but then they took off, when they took off the old siding, there was all this marvelous detail in the gables that has made me realize that it was an exact duplicate of another house in Holland by the Catholic Church. And now they've replaced, when they replaced it, they just, you know, covered it all up or tore it out. I don't know what they did. But I think if we had seen that, those gable ends, I don't think we would have allowed them to cover them up with, I mean, even if they couldn't save the siding, they could have put narrow, you know, appropriate siding on and then left those gable ends and repainted those. Those were in fine shape, you know, because they'd just been covered up by the asbestos siding over the years.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wonder in our process, can we ask for a look at that before we approve what they do next?
I think it'd be appropriate if somebody's asking for a complete overhaul of it to say, you know, hey, we approve this, but on the condition, because we want to let them move forward, but on the condition you come back with some pictures if there is some original character or detail that we can, you know, preserve or.
I'm still confused. Was it covered? Is that, you're saying that it was covered with asbestos?
Yeah, when the siding, like when the picture, the before picture we're looking at, they had those shingles, you know, those big asbestos shingles.
Okay, right.
And
Wow.
whoever had put it on, in those days, I guess they just covered up the whole house with it. You know,
Sure.
they didn't even worry about where it's going. They just
Right, sure.
everything. And so when they tore the asbestos, I have pictures of it when they tore it off.
Okay.
And some of the siding was, you know, in better or worse shape, but the gable ends had all that, you know, interesting
Oh, fish
sort of
scale or something.
sunrise, pattern.
Yeah, okay,
It was more
I
than
get you,
just a
yeah.
fish
More than
scale.
just
It was
fish,
really,
yeah, okay.
and it's there's about half a dozen houses in the historic district that have that pattern.
Sure.
So it not only binds it to this exact duplicate
Right,
house on
yeah.
11th and Maple, but to a pattern that you see in the district, and now that is gone.
That
And,
11th and Maple is in this document, I believe.
Pardon?
I think that 11th and Maple is in
Oh,
this
is it?
document, the
Okay.
kind of mustard colored house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, it
Yeah,
just,
you're right, that was a,
I feel like that was a chance where we lost that
And-
connection.
and maybe the width of, the height of the siding reveal needs to be part of what we approve. I think
Yeah.
Yeah, because they
is.
put
They went
8 inch
soft
on
on
instead of the 11th that was on 11, or the 4 inch
Right.
siding that was on there, they went to an 8 inch, so it just,
And we didn't,
Yeah,
I don't
it
think
was,
we
like-
discussed it, or did we?
well, I think the drawings, I went back and looked at the drawings, and the
Drawings
drawings
might
make
say.
it look like 4.
But maybe then in our approval, we should have said,
Yeah,
we approve
reveal
4-inch reveal.
Yeah, no, I think we would do better next time, but
Yeah.
anyway.
So my question is, how would we like that reflected in the guidelines, or should we reflect it in the guidelines, or is that again one of those things that comes up at the COA review? We do have a list of what the applicant should provide if requesting substitute siding material.
Can we put I don't know,
What-
it's a caution, but if we can say in there, you may be required to, show reveal what's underneath before the final, I think, whatever Justin said, something along those lines.
I know, like next to me, on the 12th Street side, that they covered that house with vinyl siding like 15, 20 years ago. And I know that there's really nice detail hidden underneath it. And so I would think that there's a lot of the houses that were put vinyl siding on in the 70s in our district, that there's probably nothing wrong with the wood underneath them.
Right.
And that it would be really good to look at any of them before we say, like to just go ahead and say, okay, you can replace vinyl with vinyl. I think it would be better to take a restorative measure.
So from a homeowner standpoint, then you run into a situation where we had that same situation when we put up the garage. They wanted us to put up cement board on the garage, and I had vinyl on the house. And I told them I wasn't gonna do it. Why would I have 2 different materials on my house? Because now you've got budget. And they said, well, peel off what's there and see how much damage is there. No, I'm not budgeted for that. And I get concerned about where do we draw the line on that? I know we wanna make recommendations that maintain the historic characteristic and quality of the home, but to have them peel something off and they get halfway into it or whatever, they go, I can't do it now. Now they gotta go back and,
Well, I think in this case, for instance,
you're just talking about the
they're
detail.
taking out the whole siding of the house, and we're saying, okay, you can replace, well, asbestos you can't replace like for like, and so we're going on the assumption that the stuff underneath
Okay.
is probably, needs to be replaced. However, in this particular situation, they could have peeled off the asbestos, taken off the rest of the siding, let's say it was unsalvageable, or they decided they didn't want to do it. But we would have said, okay, you can replace the siding part, but the stuff in the eaves you have to keep because that's a significant detail. I don't think it would have impacted their budget.
Okay.
It was more what they kind of wanted. They wanted a look of a whole different house than
Right.
was there, was my takeaway from
So
it.
now you go from a maintenance-free house to a cross of both.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
it's not.
Yeah, but up there, it doesn't, right?
It's not maintenance free though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why? Because they have like composite siding.
Well, I don't know what we're talking about. You would talk like for like on the vinyl. When they peeled the vinyl off is when they discovered the ornate pieces up.
yeah, I mean, I'm struggling with it, or just in my mind, because I feel like in this case, a significant reference to the whole neighborhood, to the other
Sure.
houses, and everything was lost. And so I look back on it and think, well, what would have been a response that would have honored, okay, we're taking the asbestos off, we get that, And the first thing might be, well, can you save the siding? Maybe
Sure.
you patch it in, or, you know, I think we're giving people quite a bit of wiggle there where we're not saying, okay, we're gonna make you, once we peel it off and we see that siding, we're gonna make you keep
Okay.
wood siding. I don't know. I don't think we've said that in any case. We've said, okay, vinyl is gonna be okay because you're not gonna do asbestos. But I think we can hold to saying, we want to maintain the look of that house, and especially in this particular situation where it has all these other reference points in the city that are gone.
Okay. So if
I-
it's uncovered in that process.
Yeah, and I get that we're asking a homeowner to sort of, you know, do a little work on it, but but I think that's honoring the historic district more than saying, well, you know, we want a whole different look. We want a house like the one on the corner
Right.
of Maple and 11th. That's what we want in our corner, and we want to make that house into that, and that's
Okay.
different than restoring the house, or at least that in my mind.
Yeah, and I think it honors the intention of not destroying characteristic features or original materials just because we're not aware that they're there because they were covered up with vinyl or some other siding type. As soon as that covering is removed, all of a sudden there is a feature there that then we would want to discuss again. So it's almost
Well, and we do that already. We say like, well, you can't do stuff that, like the firehouse, for instance. He's talking about covering up some wainscot on the inside, but in a way that when he could take it off and it's still good again. Well, I don't know if they did that there, or if this.
Yeah, I don't know whether they simply covered it up again like it was before, or
Well-
if they stripped it off and whether it would still be there. I don't
Yeah,
know.
but once they take it off, if they would then come to us with a COA and are asking to, hey, can I cover this with vinyl siding, we'd probably say no.
Yeah, right.
So just the fact that it's unknown,
Yeah.
you know, I think, and that's a tough thing to talk to a homeowner about.
No, I
'Cause
get that. Yeah.
they don't want to be halfway through a project and then all of a sudden there is this unknown that could, you know, greatly. But I think it's worth the discussion and worth
Yeah.
a second glance of,
Mhm.
you know, besides, hey, we're approving this, but like we really want you to come back and leave that condition in there for us of saying, hey, if there's something uncovered that is of value, that we have the right to kind of look at that.
And it's been interesting. I mean, I can think of 4 houses that since I've been on the commission that we've looked at, and 3 of them kept the old siding after a tear off and either repaired it, and the one that Nick, you know, worked on most recently, this was the only one where they went back and just covered everything over again. So it's just interesting that.
I wonder too, often it's vinyl that's coming off, and say what you will about vinyl, it protects what's underneath. So often when you take the vinyl off, the wood really
Yeah.
isn't too bad. I don't know
Right.
what happens when you take asbestos off, because I don't know how that was fastened.
Right.
Yeah, I'd have
But,
to look at the pictures, but it,
Yeah.
Anyway.
Guys are making me think about my own house. It's not a historic district, but
No?
it's
So-
got vinyl siding covering, and I can see little shakes peeking out of the bottom.
Oh,
And
sure.
I'm like, oh, little shake bungalow, but
I want that little sheep.
yeah.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is adding a statement about how if something is uncovered in the process of doing a full house siding replacement, then the applicant will be asked to come back for further review,
I think
something
that's
like that.
appropriate. Yeah.
And then the details of that I think would be worked out
Case by
case by
case.
case, but
Yep.
that it's known that this might be an ask and is
Yeah.
expected.
Mhm.
Okay.
I like that idea. I hope we don't do it at the cost of costing them another month.
Yeah.
Is it something that staff could look at? Or-
I think it could be a consideration of going past you, and then if you deem it necessary to bring to another meeting,
Yeah,
Is that
so,
too much?
or what I'm wondering is if a case were to come up like this, in the pre-discussions that I have before it even comes to the HDC,
Mhm.
see if they're willing to look.
They could do some exploratory.
Yeah, and come prepared
Maybe
with
even
that.
before that, yeah, and tell us
Before
what they
the meeting
found.
itself, and that might not always be possible because
Sure.
it's
Right.
part of that process of taking everything down
Yeah.
to
Yeah, sure.
what
And
we're
it-
talking about.
It does seem like usually people they'll peek at the bottom couple layers to determine, and a lot of times that's not where you're gonna find those details. It's typically in the peaks and the
No,
gables
right.
and stuff like that. That maybe that can be a good recommendation though, to say like, hey, if it's possible
Mhm.
for you to just take a look behind there
Yeah.
somehow, that would be helpful.
Okay. Any other siding thoughts? Sort of like the windows, it's explained what the different materials are. I don't, one's not necessarily weighted over the other. And then the last section is on just wood specifically. And that's sort of the end of the design guidelines. Any thoughts or feelings? Okay to move on to the appendix, or, yeah? So there was this prepared statement on the benefits of preservation. It includes references to the property values report that was done a handful of years ago now. There's also a copy of the ordinance, which I think is nice to have to reference because we refer to it a lot, and it can be accessed by the public if you know where to look, but sometimes I think having it here makes sense. At the end, I also have a hyperlink to the online version. The application process for a COA. And then I think we kind of talked about this. Here's more drawings from a previous guidelines from Holland on the styles of homes. Using actual houses in Holland. A list of historically designated properties in the city. There were a few that I found missing or the information was wrong since I sent this document out last, so that's why I highlighted them. There's not a great succinct list of all of these anywhere online, so I'm kind of happy that we're providing one. And I had to run around to a lot of different places to double check everything. So this is a section, local suppliers, designers, and contractors. It's a little bit of a gray area. One, this is a question that I'm asked a lot, and the standard answer is I can't recommend anyone specific, but I can provide a list. And we do have a list that's from the city's home repair program of different contractors and suppliers and builders and everything that I'll use. We don't really have a specific historic district one, so I wasn't sure, or because we don't have one right now, I think that's something that would take a little bit of time to put together to make sure it's done correctly and that we are not favoring one or over the other. I myself am still becoming familiar with everyone who does work in the historic district and everything. So those were my thoughts about why perhaps we wouldn't have this section in here in this version. But I'm very open to hearing your thoughts because, again, I understand why it would make sense to have it.
Right.
We just don't have the content.
I'm okay with omitting it.
Me
I
too.
feel like it's also something that is something that would need to be updated so frequently and
Yes.
changing. It'd be such an organic piece that in something like this might not
Okay.
be most appropriate.
Yeah.
Yeah, every time I get asked, I'm like, oh, I mean, it's,
Yeah, your heart
it's,
sinks.
it's a tricky
It'd be
one.
nice if you could.
It would be a good idea if you could recommend to whomever is applying that they have their builder or contractor contact you to go over any rules, because I think sometimes when people are bidding stuff, they might not take into consideration they're in the historic district.
Mhm. Mhm. I recently had an individual who I had been working with the contractor, and now I'm working with the homeowner directly on answering some questions. So that happens a little bit, but yeah, I think just know the whole process. Mhm. Okay, so that's that section. Here's the glossary that I mentioned. Defines quite a few items.
Hmm.
I'm just looking to see if any of those things. So, oh, we need a space there, but we have L, a wing or addition
Mhm.
extended from the back of a house at right angles to the length of the building containing full-size rooms.
It comes up in crossword every so often. L-E-L-L.
That's right.
Okay, so in the definition for entablature, if you go up,
Oh, there we go.
we include cornice, frieze, and architrave, so we should include definitions for those three terms. I know you have architrave. I don't know if you have cornice and frieze.
I will double check that and add them if they are not. I would think we do because we mentioned cornice and frieze in other parts of the document, but I will still.
I looked for
I
frieze
don't
and
see
didn't
frieze.
Don't
see
see
it,
frieze.
but I would believe you have cornice.
Okay.
Cornices in there.
Yeah.
And we'll
Yeah,
add
we do
frieze.
bring up frieze a lot too. So.
The other one that I bring up a lot is pediment. Do we have
Mhm.
that one? And portico.
Let's see.
Yes. And yes.
Excellent, thank you. Yep. Are there any other terms that we think are missing?
So there's a term, entasis,
Okay.
which if you Google it, it has a pretty good definition to it. I can email it to you.
Okay, thank you. We will add it. So the next section is references. These are both references that folks can do further reading on, but then also references that were used to prepare this document. And then this is my last big point of discussion, which again is back to the treatment of cultural landscapes. This is, to the best of my knowledge, a direct copy paste of the description of it on the National Park Service website. It's 22 pages. I wasn't sure if this was the place for it. I like what we've decided to still keep in acknowledging everything, but I'm wondering if maybe a link to this in the references section might make more sense, especially as the scope of it remains pretty small. It's really interesting information, so I don't want to discredit it, but it seems a little out of place with everything else, and the focus shifts a bit.
And if this is a direct link from some other document
Yeah.
that would hopefully be online that you could just hyperlink to,
Yes.
I think that would be maybe more appropriate with how inapplicable this is to most of the
Right.
discussions that we're doing.
I'll double check, but I believe in the section above this, or the section that we talk about this in the guidelines, I have the link to the actual online version, and then I can also re-put that
I think that
in the
would be-
references section.
I think that'd be sufficient.
Is everyone else comfortable with that?
Yep.
We are still scrolling.
Get through all those 20-some pages.
Yeah. And then this is the last section, which is an index of the preservation briefs, which again are all accessible online. These are the hyperlinks to them online, but they provide additional information, especially for people who might not live in the historic district but are looking for additional resources. I've shared these before and used them in school a lot.
The only thing that I would mention, so the previous guidelines had a map of the districts
Yes.
in it. Is that something that we feel would be appropriate?
Yes, thank you for
Very
reminding me. I was
long.
gonna say, yeah, I don't know if we want that at the beginning, at the end, where it would make the most sense.
Beginning, I think, because I think we want to remind people right away that if you live in this district, there are some protections and some guidelines. And if you don't, why are you reading it?
Why
As a
bother
stop-
with the rest of this?
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
not-
well, I mean, unless you have an interest
Good
in it.
read.
why-
Yeah. Page turner.
And then we have an updated map that's now on the city website that shows just the properties that are within the locally designated historic districts. Those are the folks that need to apply for COAs.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's very useful.
Be helpful.
And I know I've said this before, I'd like to be out front about it so that we congratulate people who have moved into the district and say, look what you get now. Look at the protections that you're afforded, as opposed to wait till they want to do something and say, oh, we can't do that. I think we don't. I think we want to be more. I think we want to be, and we are more helpful than that.
Yeah, I agree. So that's the end of the document. Congrats for getting through. So there are some changes that I will make. Is this something that you all feel like we should meet on again? Or before sending it to SHPO after the changes are made? Or I could send out an updated version
Yeah.
to see at that point
Yeah.
if how we feel maybe?
Yeah, that might be good.
Okay.
Is that the map? Is that the map? Yeah. Oh, yeah, okay.
All right. Any other questions, concerns, comments?
No, thanks for a lot of work.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah,
you.
this is
For
fabulous.
Lee and
This
Task.
is an amazing amount.
Again, Phil did almost all the text work. I've
Well,
just tried to make it
You put it all in one
digestible.
No,
place.
but
Yeah.
that's important. I mean,
Very
it's,
important.
not an insignificant contribution for sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very good.
Well, I will again draft a new version. I'm not sure when that will be ready. We have a meeting next week, but I will send
Say
it out.
8 o'clock?
Yeah, right.
So what's going on with City Hall?
So City Hall is having, or is proposing exterior, they're calling it restoration work of primarily repointing masonry, cleaning, spalling and water stains from sprinklers on the ground floor, and I think we're redoing the north entrance stairway over there as well. It's quite a long list of things they would like to do. Quinn Evans is involved, and then they have a separate contractor to do the project. So that's on the docket for next week, and it'll be a big one.
Do we have to officially close the meeting?
Yes.
Okay. Somebody want to move to recess?
Yeah. So moved.
Support?
All in favor?
Aye.
I as well.